Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
Bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield. That's YouTube's Pop Culture Minefield. You can watch this show every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on both YouTube and Rumble. And today I have a great show today. We're going to do the movie Death Wish. But before I do that, I hope everybody had a great holiday season. Hope everybody's gotten what they wanted. I want to tell the folks that at the Los Angeles Mission, we served a meal on Thanksgiving holiday, and I actually caught COVID, so I didn't go back to work the Christmas holiday. But they also served up a Christmas holiday dish, and they actually give presents to any of the kids who are in and around Skid Row for the holidays. Meaning, if they don't have a place to live or they're lived in shelter housing, they pull together some gifts and they give some gifts. So do me a favor, check out the Los Angeles Mission, losangelesmission.org, and make a donation. My goal is to call those guys up because I want to get the CEO, Troy Vaughn, on, and he can talk about his life as a homeless person and how he recovered and now has risen to run the Los Angeles Mission. It's an inspirational story, but also we'll get into the policy. Hopefully we'll get into the policy. That's going to be for my other show, and I guess I ought to do a plug for my other show. My other show is Briefing with the Chief, and that is on kgradb.com. It runs on Rumble every 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so that's 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I cover the news, public policy, and politics, and whatever else the host, that would be me, wants to cover. Now, my next show tomorrow, we're going to do a takedown of George Gascon and all the people that are still supporting him. You would be surprised, but he has on his endorsement page, his supporters page, somebody who actually tweeted out some incredibly anti-Semitic comments after October 7th. It's her name is Melina Abdul. She's the head of Black Lives Matter grassroots in Los Angeles. Incredibly anti-Semitic comments by that professor, because she's a professor at local university. So I guess it doesn't surprise you that there's anti-Semitism at the university. But we're going to do a takedown of all of his supporters, including Adam Schiff, who still supports him, and talk about how their support took out a good DA, Jackie Lacey, and brought in a disaster, George Gascon. So that one's a fun one because I get to talk about public policy and the failures of what's going on in Los Angeles and around the country. But this show, what we're going to do on this show is we're going to talk about Death Wish, and there are definitely some parallels to what is going on in the movie here in Death Wish with Charles Bronson, the frustration of the public with crime, and why this became a popular film at the time. And so I before I do that, let me bring on our guest. My first guest is a retired chief from Santa Paula Police Department, and that is Matt Rodriguez. Matt also retired as a captain from Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Good morning, Matt. I hope you had a great holiday season.
Oh, good morning. Happy New Year, Pat. Happy New Year, John, everybody. It was great. And football yesterday was incredible. Lived up to all the hype.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that when we get John on, because he's a football fanatic as well, like both of us are as well. Hey, and my next guest is John Baylis. He's a retired lieutenant from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He is the intrepid John Baylis. He buzzed us with paperwork. He's a man for all ladies, but now he's only got one, and he's happy with that. And he's getting married soon. We talk about it. But yesterday was there's 3 games that I really enjoyed yesterday that I watched that I thought were fantastic. And I watched the Wisconsin LSU game, which I thought was really good. I mean, Wisconsin was beating those guys, and LSU came back, and it was supposed to be LSU was supposed to have this explosive offense, offense, but Wisconsin held them for a long time. I thought Wisconsin was going to win. A surprise they lost at the end, of course. And then there was it was the Michigan Alabama game. Now, I always want Alabama to lose because there's somebody who's a big supporter of Alabama in my past, and Matt knows who this person is. And so I always want Alabama to lose. Right? And I also think they're pretty arrogant over there because I think they can win everything. And I'm from the state of Michigan, so it was doubly sweet that Alabama lost and that Michigan was the one who beat them, right? And then I caught the Texas Washington game. Now there was a reason why I was really excited to see Washington win, because this is the last year of the Pac-12 as we know it, right? And some of these guys are escaping to the Big Ten, but the traditional rivalry for the Rose Bowl was always the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. And now, in the last year of the Pac-12 as we know it, they're playing in the college playoff. I mean, that's not really a fairy tale story, but it is a, just desserts, I guess, for the Pac-12. What do you think, Matt?
Oh, no, I'm thrilled to Pac-12. Les, I think I've shared this with you. My daughter's up in Seattle now producing the news, so there's a buzz up there as well. Now, I was thrilled for Washington and Penix and then, Michigan. That was just incredible. Anytime Alabama takes a fall, I'm happy. And anytime that Texas takes a fall, I'm equally happy because of what Vince Young did to USC in 2005. So it was really, and it's great to see two undefeateds going into the big game next week. I'm really excited. I was glued to the couch like Velcro yesterday.
What do you think, John? What do you think of the whole bowl playoff series and actually some of the other bowl games? I'm glad to see Liberty get crushed.
I'm not
a lot of hype around Liberty, and then they end up getting crushed.
Oh, Liberty! I knew that was going to happen. Liberty is a small school, and they were outweighed on the offensive line by 30 pounds per man. Yeah. So they just couldn't hold up. They had a great season, but I'm not an SEC fan for the most part. I wanted LSU to lose to Wisconsin, even though Wisconsin is super boring. It's just because I don't like Brian Kelly. He was at Notre Dame. We got rid of it then. But that Alabama game, I'll tell you, Michigan, they missed that extra point. And the announcer said when it was 13-10 or whatever it was, he goes, that could come back to haunt him. Then it wouldn't have gone to overtime if they'd have made that extra point. But I'm glad they did because I'm glad we beat them. Their defense was stout.
I think next year during football season, hopefully I'll still be doing this show, and we'll carve out a couple of shows where we just do a football movie and we talk about what's going on in college football. What do you think? You guys up for that?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
They've changed so much. NCAA really isn't in charge anymore. It's that NIL. Yeah. And these kids can transfer wherever they want, and they're making millions before they even get into the pros.
Yeah.
At LSU, their Heisman winning quarterback didn't play yesterday.
Yep.
He opted out. A lot of players opted out this whole week, and I don't like that. They never used to do that.
LSU's number. I forget what quarterback opted out, and then their number 2 stepped in, and he had 300 or 400 yards. I can't remember which game.
Yeah, that was the Heisman winner. He opted out.
That was what game, Matt?
Miller Moss did that at USC. He came in and threw 6 touchdowns against Louisville. But, yeah, with the game being in flux the way it is and the NIL, like John's talking about, everything's changed. Next year they go to a 12-team format for the championship. That's going to be great for the playoffs. And then
I've always wanted that.
This whole bit about, people sitting out and they're going to the transfer portal or they're going to the NFL. They're not going to play the bowl games. They got to figure that part out because, you saw some of the games like, Georgia destroyed somebody and then Ohio State didn't have a quarterback. And so that part of it hopefully goes away because, that sort of destroyed a little bit of the secondary bowl games. But, the 2 big games made up for all of it.
Yeah, it was a lot of good football and I guess and also a good movie that I had you guys watch, Death Wish. And I guess we got to get to business here. One of the reasons there's actually 2 reasons why I want to do this movie is it's kind of emblematic of what's going on right now. Crime is spiking in blue cities for the most part. and people are frustrated. So I mean that's what comes out in this movie. The other thing is Death Wish 2. They have one of the punks in Death Wish 2 was on a previous show of mine. He was in Dirty Harry's Sudden Impact. His name is Kevin Howard. I can't remember his full name now. Kevin Major Howard is his name. He's a friend of Mike Astley's, if you guys remember. John probably remembers Mike. And so I said, well, okay, well, let me do Death Wish, and I'll use you guys and I'll do Death Wish with Mike Astley's and the actor that was actually in the movie. And I think he ends up getting killed by Charles Bronson.
Wasn't that kid also in Magnum Force?
He was in no. You know what? He played. Probably his most premier role was Full Metal Jacket. He played Rafter Man, which is, if you remember, Matthew Modine was the main character, and he played a military reporter kind of guy, right? But he had a cameraman. His cameraman was Rafter Man, which was this actor, and so he was a good guy. And he also does the memorial card things for the military and police. So he has the cards with all the names of slain folks from September 11th and those that went over to fight after September 11th, and then an LA County memorial car. Him and Mike Astley's worked on that. So he's a good guy. He's very supportive of law enforcement and very supportive of the military. And he was generally a fun guy to have on, because we don't actually get a lot of conversation about the movie making part of the movies. And so he added to that, as well as we could still do the cop stuff, which was kind of fun. But hey, this movie was released in 1974. It's a vigilante action thriller with, the iconic Charles Bronson. And I couldn't really imagine anybody else in the role at that time. I think he's perfect, right? And and it was made by a book that was written only a couple years before that. In 1972, it was written by Brian Garfield, and so it was. I remember this movie when it came out was very interesting. I think I probably couldn't see it at the movie, so I would have been probably 12. So I don't think I saw it obviously many years later, right? And so Happy New Year's to everybody that's watching us on Pop Culture Minefield. So what'd you think of the movie, Matt?
I thought it was great. It's funny. I would have been 9 years old when that movie was made. And John, I'm sure you were in your 40s, but so it was interesting to see how movies were made back then. And then the other thing was, I didn't know about New York City. I didn't grow up in that side of the world. So over here, when I've been to New York, it's just this big metropolis that's touristy and expensive and everything. And then to know that it was, like that, and I've read about that and heard about that in the past, but to see that again brought to life in the movie is interesting to know that, when you're going out into the streets, you're taking your life into your hands, or on the subway, that it was just crime was just a way of life in New York City.
It's that way.
So, I thought it was interesting. And, I know how he feels. Some people, they get victimized, and now they're pretty angry about it. So I thought it was a great movie.
What'd you think, John?
Oh, excellent movie. Very apropos for the times now and back then. I mean, we're doing it all over again. Crime is so high and nothing's being done. There's criminals everywhere. People are afraid.
So I know you're a history buff and you're aware of New York, and we got a comment that this is a story of a common man turned vigilante. Yes, that is true. Probably not a common man. He's more of a upper middle class guy.
Oh yeah,
as an architect. But hey, in the 70s, New York City was on its knees, right? The Big Apple had some worms in it, and it was on its knees, right, John?
Yeah, how we have California has the pretty boy Newsom as governor.
Yeah.
The mayor of New York City at that time was the original pretty boy, John Lindsay. He was on all the Fortune 500 and all the Gentleman Quarterly magazines, but he was the mayor from 66 to 73. And that's crime went sky high. Another Democratic mayor, crime sky high. And the bums and just dirtbags were riding the subways all night long, back and forth. You couldn't get on the subway without being assaulted. And then you had Abe Beame after him from 74 to 78, same stuff. It didn't change until, believe it or not, Giuliani, when he came in 94 4. And he actually had everybody taken off the subways, had all the graffiti taken away, had cops on the subways, and it was safe again. And crime went way down. But, back then and now, because of de Blasio, that piece of crap, and the current mayor, you've got crime that's sky high. There was a shooting the other day, and some idiot on X, or used to be Twitter, says, and it was a cop, says, why do people have to carry guns? What are they, afraid of everything? And I had to explain to them what life is. Some people are just stupid. But yeah, crime's sky high and people are afraid, and they want to take care of themselves. And in New York, it's just like in California. Good luck getting a
CCW.
Carry.
Yeah. It's crazy what's going
Great
on in
movie,
California.
Though. Very apropos, and there's people that are thinking that same way now.
Yeah, I know it's election season, right? And so on my new show, I started at the beginning of December, and one of my focuses is to do a regular update on Soros-funded DAs around the country. And that includes, of course, with a special attention on George Gascon here in LA. And just saying, hey, elections matter.
Yep.
Just because George Soros spends a lot of money to put him in doesn't mean you got to vote for him, right? You got to pay attention. Look at around you. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago when these idiots were elected? If the answer is no, then you vote them out. If they're directly related to them, you vote them out. I mean, I was just reading an article today. It was produced by the Union for Deputy District Attorneys, and they talk about how Gascon and his staff are hiding information from parole boards to allow violent felons to be released. And like I told you, I'm monitoring all the DAs, Soros-funded DAs around the country. That's what Larry Krasner's doing. Kim Fox is not seeking re-election in Cook counties, but that's what she's been doing. And what they do is they look at the conviction and they say, oh, there's a problem with this conviction, so let's go get a resentencing and let's convince this family to go along. And nobody looks at, well, was there really a problem with the conviction? And the answer is no. They've just decided that there's a problem with the conviction. And then they, like the one that they were going to do with Deputy Williams, I don't know. I did a show where I talked about this.
Guy Williams killer.
Yeah. And they said, oh, there's a Brady violation. And of course, they didn't demonstrate the Brady violation. They tried to get the family to agree to a lower sentence for the murder of Deputy Jack Williams in 1979. They pushed back. And they said, and guess, you're not going to believe who was pushing the case. We know her. Diana Tran. Diana Tran was pushing this. She works for this conviction integrity unit in the DA's office. And what they were saying was, oh, there's Brady violations. So, we're going to lose it. So we're not going to defend the conviction in court. Now, this is 40 years of DAs from LA and the state's attorney general's office defending this case. So for 40 years, nobody found a problem, but Diana Tran and these other folks find a problem, and they're not going to fight the case. Well, the DAs, the union for the DAs and the cops made such a hue and cry over this thing that it went public. And after it went public, Gascon backed off. And so, and the judge looked at it and says, well, there's no Brady violations here, which means on the light of day, these allegations being made by these Soros-funded DAs and their staff don't measure up. That's why they got to hide it. And that's what's going on. And I think it adds to what's going on here, just because we have these people in charge who are choosing not to fight for the people and not to fight for the victims, but for whatever reason have decided that they're on the side of the criminals. I don't know if you guys want to comment on that, but that's what's going on. Right.
And Pat, I got one for you. I don't know if you saw this morning, but this is the difference between, narratives, I would say, and this is very topical, but I don't know if you guys saw, but somebody yesterday tried to ram the barriers at the parade, and they arrested a female for assault with a deadly weapon, which tells me she didn't turn down Del Mar Avenue or whatever it is over there. And that's the difference between us talking about this and talking about a marred Rose Parade and the 153rd Rose Parade or whatever it was. It would be a totally different story, not only just here but around the world, right? So, but it'll be very interesting to see if anything comes out about that person, because, or they just under the rug and, hey, mental illness.
They'll say she's mentally ill. And
mentally ill.
Terrorism. And, she's really, she's troubled, you know,
having a rough
whatever.
day, gotten an argument with her loved one or what have you. But try to imagine, going through the barrier, and then you have, you have deaths or many injuries at the Rose Parade, and we're having a totally different discussion. So I was shocked to see that this morning in the Tribune. So let's see what comes out as a result of that.
I'll check it out. And well, Martine, let's roll into our first scene. And this is just a scene that kind of introduces Charles Bronson, who he is. And I just thought it was a good scene just because it shows, I think Bronson was probably into his 50s, but he's looking pretty fit there. He's got a beautiful wife. Her name is
he was
Lang.
always in shape.
Yeah, he was always, and he's Polish. So
yeah,
Polish.
Charles Buczynski.
Yeah, Mia Sposa. Patty is Polish. She's a sweet gal upstairs
Old
listening
Lang.
to the show. Hello, Patty. He's probably not eating too many pierogies if he's staying in shape like that. Let me tell you something, because they have a lot of dough and they are good. Cooked in, actually, if you fry them in butter, very good. But here he is. He's fit. He's in his 50s. He's got a beautiful wife. Obviously, they're in Hawaii. You later learn, so he can afford to take these trips from New York to these exotic places at the time in the 70s. That was an exotic place to go to, Hawaii, right? So what do you think? Charles Bronson, tough guy, John?
Oh, always. The guy, he's a World War II vet. He actually fought in the Battle of Bulge. The guy's a stud. And he was always in shape. When he played Chato's Land, a movie where he was like a Geronimo character.
Yeah.
Just ripped. Just totally in shape. Then remember Hard Times?
Hard Times.
Played the bare knuckle boxer. I mean, the guy was always in shape. But, in this movie, he's a conscientious objector.
Yeah.
He was in World War or Korea or whatever, supposedly, and he was a medic, and he refused to kill people, which, hey, we have a lot of people like it, but at least he still served, and he did what he could do. And what's funny part is later on, they realized, well, you were a conscientious objector. Yeah, but I didn't say I couldn't shoot. His dad raised him to be a hunter and everything else as the character. But the guy was always a stud, always in all his movies, and great actor.
Yeah, I remember him from the original Magnificent Seven as well. He was in that show. Good
best
movie.
Buster never made.
Yeah. So Matt. What'd you think?
I think he looked great. He was in great shape, and then when the movie opens up like this, it's an idyllic situation, and lush Hawaii and all that. I'm like, okay, this is interesting, because I think I see a contrast coming to some darkness later on in this movie, right? With the name, you got the name Death Wish, and it opens up on the beach, right, with sunbathing. I'm like, okay, this is going to get interesting. So I thought it was a great opening.
Yeah, and it kind of sets the tone for he's kind of in this idyllic life, and he's oblivious, and a lot of people are there. Somebody asked me once when we were talking about these Soros Splendid DAs, what's it going to take to change? And my comment was one victim at a time. Unfortunately, one victim at a time. My son got a rude awakening. He woke up one morning, went down to go to work, and somebody had broken into all the storage things at his condo complex. And he saw the guy, and the guy ran away. And he called LAPD, and LAPD said, oh, is he there yet? Is he still there? No, he's not there. I mean, I told him we'd have handled it different. We'd have handled it like this has just occurred. We'd have been rolling hot. But LAPD said, okay, well, just go online and make your report. Very disappointing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
and his place hadn't got hit, so he goes upstairs to do all that stuff. Comes back, and then his storage unit got hit. And the guy came back and hit him a few more times. He looked through all the security footage and identified the guy, and is still trying to call LAPD. And they said, oh, well, we'll get somebody out there sooner. Just go online and report it. Very disappointed. I told him you got to get out of the city. But like I said, and then he listened to my first show, and my second show I did a takedown of Gascon a little bit. Jonathan Hatami, who's running for district attorney in LA. I had him on, and I did a little bit of takedown of George Gascon, and he listened to the show. My son did, and he sent it to all of his friends. So I'm right, I think. What's it going to take to change? One victim at a time is the way I see it. Okay, let's go into the next scene, and this is Punks and Freaks. Now, did you recognize any of the?
Yes.
Yes, you did.
I think I saw Jeff Goldblum, right?
Yeah.
Freak number one was Jeff Goldblum. That's his first acting thing. Very first acting job.
I think he was still growing up because I don't think he looks 6'5" there. But yeah, he's and
Yep.
I don't know. I don't think I guess this is akin to what we have going on where these kids are. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw it at the Del Amo Mall. They arrested 5 teenagers. 1,000 kids were going to come and attack the Del Amo Mall. This was a few nights ago.
Yep.
And so
Heard about that.
they got a couple hundred cops out there. I don't know where they got them all from. I imagine the sheriff's department was there, and they arrested 4 of them. So I guess that what we're seeing in the film, this is what we're seeing now. Only it's on steroids, right? Except for the prices. Look at the prices. I don't think you can buy anything for $2 anymore. But so Jeff Goldblum was one of the freaks. Here's the other thing: is when I was growing up, if you're talking about the kids who were kind of on the margins and smoking dope and being kind of, we called them freaks when I was a kid. So it was, it was the jocks and the freaks, right? And then it kind of after the punk era, everybody became punk, right? You know, and yuppies, I guess, is the genre. So, but yeah, there's Jeff Goldblum, right?
Yep. Look how young he is. His first acting job.
Yeah. And the other thing is they're having their groceries delivered. I guess that's a thing in New York at that time. They looked and they decided they were going to go after these 2. I don't know why they're going to follow them home. Obviously, maybe just to rape them as well, which is what they ultimately do. But the interesting thing, when he comes back from Hawaii before this scene starts, his coworkers are setting the scene that the city is violent. And one of the coworkers said, "Hey, last week we had 15 murders in New York," and that's what it was going on in New York at the time, right? Because if you just take 10 times 52 weeks, that's 5,000 murders. But the numbers were outrageous back then. That was the problem in New York, and that's what inspires the movie.
So Pat, what was driving that? Was it drugs? Was it poverty? Was it gangs? What do you think was the driver behind the crime at that time?
Well, I think heroin was big in the city at the time, and that was part of what was going on. And I think the lack of, when you and I'm going to do this on my other show is the broken windows theory. When you stop fixing things and things go into disrepair, it gives us a sense of lawlessness. It gives a lack of ownership, and so people act that way. Is the way I kind of see it. I also think. And I don't have any data to support this, and you guys can surely, the baby boomer. We had a lot of people who were younger, coming because the baby boomer era. I was the last. Let's see, 64 was the last time, right? So you had a lot of young people from that baby boomer era that were directionless. The economy kind of dipped a little bit after World War II. Didn't have jobs, but also a lot of young people. And we all know one of the factors for increased crime is youths, right? I mean, that people being, as what they say in My Cousin Visiting, youths, however they said it. But I think part of it had to do with demographics and age. I don't know what you think about that, Matt.
Well, I think also too there was a lot of latchkey kids at this time. Both parents were working. I know mine were, and it was about this time. And kids are coming home after school to their buddies, right? And they're drinking and smoking pot or whatever, then just out carousing and causing problems. Mom and dad weren't home until 5, 6 p.m.
Well, they weren't sending them to Sunday school, Matt. I think when you're running your campaign, I said, we need to do a crime prevention program. Everybody's got to go to Sunday school. What do you think, John, by hypothesis of young age and Matt's theory that latchkey kids?
Well, that's some of the issues, of course, but coupled with that is when you have politicians like Lindsay back then that didn't do anything about any of it. They said they're anti-crime, but crime just kept doing this. And they didn't do anything to negate that. You had DAs back then that didn't do anything. You had mayor that literally chastised the police because the police, let's face it, back from 66 to 74, there was a lot of corruption in the NYPD, Serpico and all that crap. But, they just ignored it. When you're a pretty boy like Newsom, you ignore it. And that's what Lindsay did.
It sounded like the police were overwhelmed as well. The guy talked about, the chances of catching them are slim and none. They didn't have all the tools that we have today, right?
No, not nearly so.
If there's 13 murders in a week, I don't think they're too worried about the guys breaking into apartments or cars or assaulting people. They're more worried about trying to get the murders, I think.
True.
Yeah, I think when you go back to the broken windows theory and when I joined, and I don't know if you experienced Johnny B. I just remember we prioritized felony arrests and gun arrests. Those are the big
Sure.
deals. We didn't necessarily prioritize the small stuff. And if you watch the show, these guys are being kind of jerks in the store. They're being, they're spray painting, and obviously, if we dealt with the small stuff with the punks here, maybe we'd interdicted this more serious stuff, which is the theory of the broken windows theory and community oriented policing.
Right.
Sweat the small stuff. And when I came on, you didn't sweat the small stuff. And I did a movie. It was Fort Apache, the Bronx, with Paul Newman, and I kind of came away with a sense that's where, if it was, because it was written by 2 New York cops, so that was kind of their attitude is, yeah, don't sweat the small stuff, just deal with the big stuff, even as the city burns around you, right? And the change in thinking under Giuliani and Bill Bratton and others was, no, let's sweat the small stuff, because if you sweat the small stuff, and I think it was, God, Matt, help me out. Who was John Q. Wilson and Keller? These are the theorists who came up with that. And when you implement it, and I just listened to one of their podcasts, a defense of broken windows theory and where we need to go moving forward by the Manhattan Institute. But that's what I really think this was, is there was an attitude that you didn't sweat the small stuff, but that was coming from the politicians. They didn't want you, because it was seen as racist and oppressive.
No, it's the same thing now. The same then as now. And now with the shoplifting, there's no more Walgreens in San Francisco. They all pulled out because they literally could not make a living, even with their big company, because everything was being stolen. Nothing's happening. You sweat the small stuff. You stop them, then boom. And now there's videos. I keep seeing these videos on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. 5 or 6 kids go into McDonald's and just trash the place just because, or their burger didn't have enough cheese on it, and the fight's on, and nothing happens to them.
Well, that's crazy.
Explode exponentially.
I don't know, Matt. You ran for sheriff. If you were sheriff today, what would you be doing to stem it?
The first thing I talked about was being, the law and order candidate. You have to hold people accountable that are out committing crime. Period. I mean, look, there's a tipping point, right, where things start to get out of control. And why do you want to go to that level? That, I think a fundamental right of anybody living in our society is to be able to live their life in peace, free from fear, being able to, go out and recreate with their families. And for me, I, as a deputy sheriff, I hated seeing innocent people victimized. And, my sympathy did not lie with the gangbangers that were causing problems. I'll just put it to you that way.
Yeah, right.
I think that's probably a pretty universal feeling for all of us on the panel here. Let's go into the next scene. I just labeled this Officer Charles, and this is the big black guy that handled the talking with Kersey here. What's his name's the character, Bronson's character. And the other thing about this, so there he is. He goes to talk to him, and he's already had the funeral. And I did make a comment on the funeral that they did the funeral in winter, which is a typical movie thing, like cold, death. Winter represents death, and so there's, that's the symbolism of the movies, and they used it here, right? And
I thought that was a great scene, Pat.
The funeral scene.
Very well done, yeah, because it was dreary and it was cold and it was sad. I thought that the symbolism there was that was just excellent footage.
And right, and and that you see that when now that when we begin to focus and talk about movies, you understand what winter represents when it comes to death. And
it was miserable.
It's miserable. Yes,
that's what it looked like.
Which is why we probably all enjoyed living in California all that time. I don't know why, John. You get some snow where you're at as a California refugee in there in Nevada, but not much, right?
Nah,
not much
flurries.
At all. Okay, flurries. Okay. Well, I can tell you, winter can be dreary, having lived in Detroit or grew up in Detroit. But so, what I liked about Officer Charles is you can tell these guys care, but they recognize that they're understaffed, overwhelmed, and they don't have political support, which is really probably the biggest issue. When you have political support and you have the support of the people behind you, and law enforcement does not have that right now, crime is going up and hopelessness creeps in, not only with the officers, but with the community. They go into a bunker mentality. And I just wanted to show that. And they display the hopelessness, both the detective and Officer Charles. Do you want to speak to that, Matt?
Yeah, they just looked overwhelmed. And when remember when he walked into the police station, you had I think there was some women being thrown into the cell, and they were loud, and it just it kind of reminded me of what a sheriff's station could be like when you walk in, gates are slamming, people are screaming, or a jail facility. But yeah, no, the police there just looked like they were overwhelmed. They did seem like they were empathetic. They felt bad for the guy, but at the same time, they were expressing very little hope for solving this problem, which might have actually motivated him a little bit to take matters into his own hands.
Yes, I agree with that. Now, Johnny B, I got to ask you about the overcoat that Charles Bronson was there. And he was looking pretty sharp with that overcoat. And of course, his tie was tight, and the detective's tie was loose and around and looking sloppy. Now, if you were a detective in NYPD, would you be looking tight, high and tight with the tie, with that great overcoat like Charles Bronson had, or would you be kind of like the slovenly looking?
I'd be looking sharp, buddy. Come on, I'm Italian. I know how to haberdasher, okay?
Whenever I watch these movies in New York when they're tight in their winter and they got the overcoat on and they're just looking good, because I did the 7-Ups with a guy who an NYPD officer, and I don't know if you remember the movie The 7-Ups with Roy
I do,
Scheider. Yeah. And I think I had Cliff Yates on, and we were talking about, they just were looking sharp, man. That whole, it looks sharp, it looks good, it looks neat, so I had to ask you. How about the hopelessness there, John? The more serious question. What do you think about the hopelessness of the officers and catching?
Yeah, you can tell. Well, his gut hanging out and his tie off. He said, "Look, there's not much I can do." He's trying to be nice, but he's overwhelmed. Yeah. He's probably got a caseload of 30 cases every other day. Some of those are going to get left behind.
I have to tell you, when I first started in the 80s, I never felt like we didn't have the support of Sheriff Block. I always felt we did.
Had tons of support.
We just didn't have the revolution of thinking of going after the small stuff. We embraced the attitude that was consistent with LAPD and NYPD, I guess. You go after the felony, you go after the guns. In reality, so I can't say that I experienced not being supported under Block, and even for the most part under Baca. I mean, we implemented community-oriented policing under them. So I don't understand the not supporting the troops. And I think that's probably the difference between working for a sheriff and working for the chief of police. Matt, you ran for sheriff. What do you think?
Well, look, let's just get back to the small stuff. When one of the things that was emphasized when I first got to patrol, I know you guys saw the same thing, was that the drug abusers were your criminals. It was that simple. They're not fueling their habit by going to the bank and going to work every day or running their business or whatever it is. The drug abusers were the ones that were committing your felonies and your burglaries and your thefts in the middle of the night. So we focused on them as well. We in patrol, at least where I worked in the South Bay area, Carson, we focused on guns. We focused on felonies and also drug abusers, mainly people using heroin and methamphetamine and cocaine. So yeah, there was that connection as far as the smaller stuff goes, but that sort of led you to the big stuff. But as far as working for a sheriff that supports you, I felt supported in the sheriff's department, through most of my career. It just wasn't until you got into the upper ranks that we had to worry about, getting sniped by our own people, right? But but as far as being a deputy sheriff, I never felt like when I'm going out into patrol today, society is after me. I never felt that way. I felt like I was, the gatekeeper between the good and the bad. And, we're going to take that role seriously, and we're going to work hard at it. That's what we did.
So I don't have any knife wounds from suspects, but other executives who wanted to take me out, I got plenty of them in my bed.
Yeah, I look, I mentor a lot of people to this day, even police officers and what have you, and I tell them, look, just be advised, make sergeant, have a lot of fun, because after that they take all the fun out of it.
Yeah.
Once you make lieutenant, we all know that's a very tough rank, and you've got to make your own fun. We know that. John, you did a great job at that in the office, but the work was shit. We all know that. So, it's just the way it was. But yeah, I always tell people, enjoy your sergeant rank, because after that, it
gets tough. Well, let me respond to one of our guests. It's Ostonas. I think he talks about watering the flowers and keeping the lighting on. Like I said, I was listening to the Manhattan Institute and Defense of the Broken Windows Theory, and they're talking about integrating. If we're using medical as one of the goals, that it should be integrated in the broken windows theory, and law enforcement and courts should not be directed out. But one of the studies that they were looking at is, if you take vacant lots and you just spruce up the vacant lots, does that reduce crime? And it does, right?
Yep.
So, so the goal should be, one, you clean off the dope dealers and everybody else, and then you take ownership over that vacant lot and you spruce it up and you grow plants or whatever you're going to do to it to spruce it up, make it kind of a mini community park or whatever. And those things do have an impact. And I think if there was one criticism of the broken windows theory, or how we handle it, policymakers handle it, is we embrace the zero tolerance on everything, when we should have been a little more holistic in what we were doing. Yes, we continue to arrest people, but we once we take the area, we clean it up and spruce it up. And a lot of that did happen, but probably not enough, I guess. And I think we should just be looking to modify how we did the broken windows theory and integrate medical and whoever else we want to integrate into the process. And, I just had a great conversation with Jonathan Hatami and a guy who's running against Holly Mitchell in the 2nd District. And we talked about that because that's where he wants to go. And I don't know if you guys are aware, but the 2nd District now extends down into the South Bay.
Wow.
So,
yeah, Pat, if you take a look at a modern day example of that, and we've talked about this a million times, but, legitimizing public space, it's kind of a John Sullivan concept as well. And the MacArthur Park on the Red Line subway in Los Angeles, I don't know if you've been there lately, but I was there maybe about 6 months ago. They did exactly what we talked about. First of all, in the station, they pump classical music really loud.
Yeah.
So, it's pleasant for a little bit. And then, but you wouldn't want to be there long term if you were homeless. And then if you go up on the top side, which used to be an open air drug market, and across the street from MacArthur Park, it's now a legitimized vendor space. Probably not the type of vendors that you'd see in, Century City or Beverly Hills, but they're vendors nevertheless, and they're selling their wares and their goods. But nobody's sleeping on the platform, and because they pushed them all out.
When I was a chief, they asked me about that vendor program, and I said, fantastic. I said, I love it, because I have people there that are going to be there and they own the space, and that's exactly what you want. And so because they implemented it when I was still the chief of transit police there, and I thought it was a successful program. And obviously they expanded it, but they didn't do other things right. So I mean, once you take the space, you don't give it up, right? You redesign it and you maintain your authority over it. But the criminal or the social justice warriors changed that narrative, and now they're dealing with disruption on the transit system and in the city. Let's go on to the next scene, and this is the mugger with the knife. And you saw Charles Bronson. He put a couple of rolls of quarters in a sock, and he's decided he's not going to play around. And this is probably his first effort where he's walking on the street, trolling these guys and seeing who's going to come after him. And he's pissed. His murderer has not been arrested. His daughter is in a catatonic state for the most part. And here's the guy who's going to try and rob him. And Bronson turns around and he smacks him with the quarters. I didn't get a chance to see which bad guy this is, but there's a couple of these bad guys are ended up being pretty good actors where you see him in other films.
Right.
But he smacks him now. He's just starting out with a sock full of quarters, and he hits this guy in the face, which I don't know. I think that would have probably put me down. Maybe it was just a glancing blow, but he caught him. But the other thing is, after the scene, he runs home and kind of throws up, and he's
Yep.
to some degree he's disappointed with himself, I guess, or he's shocked. And I don't know if I felt that way, but he clearly is now gone from prey to being a hunter. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, and I think it was just adrenaline that led him to go off. I don't think he was so much disappointed with himself. I think he was more just amped up, and the adrenaline got him, and he got sick. But I think at that point he crossed over and said, "All right, yeah, I'm going to take these matters into my own hands at this point." And but he was out hunting, and he started. It wasn't difficult for him to find people that were accosting him.
Right, but his attitude was clearly shifted, right, John? He's and part of he's angry. Somebody killed my wife.
He's starting to become self-aware. He's still angry, but again, he's a conscientious objector, so he didn't have a gun, but later on he does. But no, he's starting to become self-aware of what's going on around him.
Yeah, well, I wrote a comment on this thing: soft on crime, too tough on criminals. So there was a shift there, and there was beginning to see a shift out of the 70s and into the 80s. I know we were always tough on crime in the sheriff's area, and I do think in LA City they were for the most part fairly consistent with our attitude. I would say sometimes the political leadership leaned a little bit to the left, and maybe they got a more scrutiny, particularly after the riots and who's the chief at the gun? Gates. What was his first name? I can't remember now.
Daryl Gates.
Daryl. Yeah. After he was out, they brought in Willie from Philly, and they kind of tried to take a softer approach. And whereas we still had Block, and he was very consistent, very strong till I think what was it 98 that Block passed away, and right around that time, or maybe it was 97 or something like that. But
well, yeah, remember too, Pat, that it was commonplace for law enforcement leaders to be known as Republicans, which the expectation was that you were going to be tough on crime, and society supported that. So, if you were, I think if in the 80s, if you ran and said, well, we're just going to, I don't really believe I'm being tough on crime, and I'm going to prosecute the deputies. I don't think anybody would have been elected under those circumstances.
Well, I would assume if homicides had stayed as high throughout the 2000s, we wouldn't even be talking about this crap, because, and you've heard this stat before. In 1993 was 13.1 homicides per 100,000 in California. Well, in 1980 in California, I believe it was 14 per 100,000, and that's throughout California. And then before Prop 47 was passed, or the year it was passed, we were down to 4.4 murders per 100,000 in California. And in the LA area, it was like 25, 26 murders per 100,000 at the peak. So we saved thousands of lives by embracing the broken windows theory and how that worked. And we didn't necessarily have to have these vigilantes run around. In New York, it was way over the top. I mean, we had Bernie Goetz. He did the thing on the subway. Remember that guy, the subway shooter?
Yep.
So this was really more of a West Coast kind of thing, where it was shocking for them that somebody would be a vigilante. Although I think in the West Coast, maybe it's because it is the West Coast and it's Los Angeles. We used to round up the posse and go after the bad guys. It was much more accepted.
Well, the other thing, Pat, I've talked about this before, and for me, it didn't go unnoticed, but when I got into law enforcement, and the same with my brother and my dad, who were both cops, they both had served in the military.
Yeah.
So when what happened to all these guys that were in the military, I'll say in, Vietnam era and early 70s, or even throughout the 70s, where'd they go after they got, discharged from the military? A lot of them went into law enforcement, and they were accepted in law enforcement. They were recruited to come into law enforcement. So, like I said, when I was a young deputy and I got out to Carson, about 80% of my supervisors were Vietnam veterans. So, they weren't going to be soft on crime. Let's put it to you that way.
I was in an EPC meeting. You guys know what that is, Executive Planning Council, and they were trying to pass a policy that I agreed with, but I wasn't. And that they only wanted to hire people who had 2 years education, right? And I was the only one who said, and I didn't serve in the military. I go, well, wait a minute here. We had September 11th. For the last 20 years, people have been joining the military to go fight for this country and fight terrorists. And we're going to prioritize somebody who chose not to join the military and went and got their 2-year diploma. And we're going to hire them over somebody who's in the military. I have a problem with that. You want to higher educated workforce. I get that. I got a degree. It was important to me. But I recognize that there are men and women who made a sacrifice for this country and helped defend this country, and we need to prioritize them. I got a Weasley response from a peer. Well, they got the VI bill. They can go to school. That's not the point. That is not the point. And I'm glad I said something because it was Alex Villanueva at the time. He shifted his thinking to include 2 years in the military, 2-year degree. So I was happy I said something, but it just, for me, and I just did a show with a homicide detective on my other show. It was called The Homicide Detective's Journey, and he was blue collar like I was blue collar, and we joined the sheriff's department before, and we didn't have degrees, and we both served honorably and did a good job throughout our career. And he never did get his degree. I got a degree, but much later in my life. It wasn't a core part of why I was a good cop. It just wasn't.
I would make an argument there, Pat. I would say, okay, where do you think you learn more? 2 years in Walnut at Mount Sac or 2 years in Germany?
Yeah.
when you're 18 years old, right? Between 18 and 20, where do you learn more, Germany or Mount Sac?
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so I was glad, and I think they did embrace that for the military, and I'm glad that is the case. But we have to remember the men and women in the military, and we shouldn't be tossing aside all of the good people who don't feel like college is their. Because right now, if you go to college, you might end up with a bunch of debt. So I don't agree with it. I think if somebody's willing to stand up and raise their hand and take the oath and live by that oath, then they're worthy. And let's be clear here. We've shifted over to a medical approach for crime prevention and crime production. A lot of people with master's degrees, PhDs, and guess what? Crime's not lower. It hasn't necessarily worked out. So let's go into the next scene, Vigilante. And he's been to Arizona. I think it was Arizona or New Mexico to redesign. Was it Arizona? Prescott, right? And to redesign some a housing development there. He got to go shooting with I forget the name of the actor there, but I recognized him from others, him in other movies and stuff. But here we learn that he knows how to shoot. He's not afraid of guns. He served in Korea as a conscientious objector, but he went as a conscientious objector because his mom was really religious, and he respected that. But he knew how to shoot, and the other thing is he knew how to hunt. He learned that from his dad. Because if you watch how he conducts himself as we move forward in the movie, he's setting these guys. He's setting the bait, right? He's the bait. He's setting the trap, and then what they're not ready for is somebody fighting back, which is the whole key part of the show, right? What'd you think of this, Matt? Where he's got his gun, and he's now looking for the problem, right?
Well, I got to go back a minute. I got the sense that his partners at work wanted to get him out of the environment.
Yes.
And so they figured, hey, send him to the desert to get a little change of pace, right? So maybe they knew something about him that we haven't picked up on. And so they sent him out to the desert, which is something that we would have done too. We see a guy that's maybe going a little bit off the rails, that we're going to try to do something different for him. And then he gets over there and he's in his element, although he's pretending he's not.
Right. And I think in this scene, he does bring a gun to a knife fight, and the guy does pay dearly for it. And but you go back, and he's upset even this time, but not quite as upset. So he's getting used to taking these guys out, right? And I think if you're somebody living in a crime-ridden city, you kind of okay, this is cool. And that kind of builds into the theme. This guy's killing bad guys, no big deal. And if you guys remember the bodega, the bodega stabbing where the girl comes in and she argues with the guy behind the counter. He's an older guy, and argument over chips, and she doesn't have money for the chips, so he kicks her out. And then the boyfriend comes back behind the counter, and the old guy, and beats the old guy, and the old guy stabs him, ends up killing him. And then she ends up stabbing him, right? And Bragg arrested the guy, right? Alvin Bragg, the Soros-funded DA, arrested the guy. You remember that case? Yep. And it was just hue and cry. So I mean, and I remember that scene as they're seeing this guy fighting back, or Charles Bronson. He's essentially setting these guys up, but he is fighting back because but I remember that the public came out and were outraged that Alvin Bragg filed on that guy initially, and then he dropped that filing and let the guy go. And I think they and people stepped up and said, if they sue him, we're gonna defend this guy. They pointed up some money to defend this guy. We're not seeing that with Daniel Penny, the guy that came to the defense of everybody on a subway train, but we did see that with the bodega cashier. What do you think, John?
Oh, absolutely. You started to see that though with Penny. Wasn't he a serviceman, military?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they're starting to do that now, and I think they've kicked the. Last I looked, they dropped the charges on him, but I'm not sure.
I'll have to look.
Pardon?
I'll have to look, but he has $3 million and go send me funds to defend himself.
Yeah.
So that's clearly, this is what we think of your policies, Mr. Bragg. We are going to provide the money so that he has the best attorneys and he can survive while he fights you. Because it really is, how dare you stand up and fight against our utopian vision of New York? How dare you do that? That's what Alvin Bragg is doing. And all the people in New York and people stepped up to fund his defense. What do you think, Matt? That's consistent with the movie, what's going on now, right?
Yeah, I just can't wrap my head around these guys that think that it's okay to go off and victimize people and endorse that kind of behavior. I don't know. It's just so foreign to me to think that let's hide information. Let these parolees who have a propensity for violence, who are known to commit violence, who predictably will commit violence, to go ahead and just let them go out and commit the violence. I can't wrap my head around any of that. I just don't understand it. I don't even take the time to sort of study why they think like that. I've tried to read up on Soros and figure out what is this utopian mindset that he has, that everybody should live together in peace and be given opportunities and forgiven for their past sins. But as sad as it is, some people just cannot live in a civilized world. They're incapable of doing that. They're born with some sort of a wire that is malfunctioning, and that violence is their way of life. And those kind of people can't be amongst peaceful people. But convincing these liberals that that's true is, I guess, until it happens to them.
Well, I think, and I'll throw out a term for you. It's a social justice warrior term. It's called trauma informed. And what they're suggesting is a lot of people in custody have suffered trauma, and their road to being an offender is through that trauma. And there are studies that show that a high level of people who are in custody, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was, I want to say 60% had indicated they had been abused as a child or a young adult, right? And so that's the motivation behind their theory. We failed these guys, they were victims, but there's two issues with that if you're flipping and you're thinking logically about it, that really destroys the narrative. The one issue is there's a significant percentage who did not declare that they had been victims and who are offending, and there are a large number of people who have been victimized who never offend. We never evaluate those two factors against the narrative trauma informed, because when you look at that, okay, well, we have a lot of people who've been victimized and don't become offenders. Do we just give these guys a pass because they've been victimized in the past? And that, to be quite frank, that is what a probation report is for sentencing. You get to hear that out. And what they're using is, we're going to use this as a blanket narrative. We believe everybody that is offender has been failed by society, whether because they've been assaulted or because they didn't get a lollipop when they were 5. Whatever it is, we're going to do that blanket approach and say this is the factor for everybody. But we all know in a civil society, in a democracy, it's about individuals and free will. And we're not holding people for making their decisions based upon their own free will. We're giving them a pass, and that is causing us problems. I think we are pretty close to our break time here. So, Martine, are we ready for our break? Are you there, Martine? I don't see you. There you go.
Yes, I'm still here. hiding cozily in the back. And yes, we are ready for our break.
So if you got a potty break, John, go now.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all: movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis, official scoops from Geekosity magazine, reviews, and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield, where they're always talking nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Meet the Seattle Vigilante. Like so many comic heroes, this warrior hides his identity. But his identity isn't the only secret he has to keep. After grievous wounds received during combat, Tier 1 operator John Russell begins to recover and comes to terms with his new reality of being an amputee. And as he learns how to use his new prosthetic limb, he finds himself caught up in the bureaucratic red tape that too many wounded veterans experience, the exhausting medboard process. Out of sheer frustration, John takes it out on the criminal scum of the city. But when reality kicks in, John realizes he started something that's having an impact on the greater world around him, and thus has to reevaluate his motives. And moreover, just how far is John willing to go to finish this war he's declared against the criminals in Seattle? And will he even survive? From the creator of IDW's award-winning graphic novel Code Word Geronimo comes a new story about a different kind of warrior, Vindicated Inc., the first of its kind disabled veteran action hero comic. The Vindicated Inc. graphic novel crowdfunding campaign on fundmycomic.com is provided in the description of this video. We hope you become a contributor. Please share this link. Thank you.
So we are helping to build excitement for Vindicated Inc. by talking about another vigilante, and this is Charles Bronson in the original movie Death Wish. And you know, I had forgotten about Gerry's effort to crowdfund his latest effort, but it's about a vigilante in Seattle, and here we are talking about a vigilante here in New York. And Seattle's a mess with all that stuff they got going on up there. It's hard to believe what they got going on. But let's jump into our next scene. And I don't know if you guys wanted to comment on the thing I said before the break, and that's the trauma informed, what you thought about that. But the next scene is Seeking Out Trouble. So in this scene, Charles Bronson's out again. But here's the interesting thing about the scene. It isn't him setting him. He's out probably setting himself as bait, but he sees a mugging in progress in which three guys are assaulting an old man or somebody who's looks like he's older than 50 anyways, but so somebody that's vulnerable, and he decides that he's going to confront him. Now he's already been to Arizona. He's got his gun, which is kind of a low caliber. I think what'd say was it 32 or something
32.
like that. 32. He's already taken one guy out with the gun, and there's guess who that was? Denzel Washington.
Yeah, that's right. I saw him there.
Denzel Washington is in this movie too. So, and he acknowledges it later. But yeah, he plays a thug, a very young looking Denzel Washington with a bit of a fro going, and but he sees this going on, and he goes and confronts them, and they're now going to take him on. Let us see your money, right? Because there's no consequences for these guys in the city. They're not going to run away. Now, I personally, if somebody's confronting me, I would think there's a reason why he's not running away, and there's a reason why he's confronting me. But hey, you know, it makes for a good movie. And he ends up taking all three of them out. And what I think is interesting he takes out Denzel, right? Is after they're talking to the one witness. The talking to the one witness is, I don't know, he does the Sergeant Schultz thing. I don't see nothing. I don't hear nothing. I don't know nothing. And he doesn't help the cops identify Paul Kersey. So what did you think of the scene, John?
Realistic, good. You FAFO, screw around and find out.
Yeah, you might want to clue a little closer to your mic, John. Matt, what did you think?
I thought it was great. Yeah, these guys were, assaulting somebody, and he picked up on it, and like you said, he's walking toward them, and they're thinking, they're not thinking, hey, he's crazy or whatever. They think he's an easy target, and he takes them out. And this is like him taking it now to the next level, because he's got 3 that he eliminates.
Well, it's interesting. Somebody commented on Trayvon Martin and Zimmerman, and I think the thing about the things that are hitting the headlines is you can't really trust what's coming out in the media these days. It's interesting how the media in the movie handles this, and it is about blood on the tracks. What bleeds leads with the media, but it's the dishonest part of what's going on with the media. For example, the media is now, the New York Times did an article, and I think it was about Gascon. And they said, well, look, crime is decreased from 2021 to 2022 by a couple percent. But if you go back to 2014, when we started his ill-fated Prop 47, or even to the beginning of his 2020, when he became the DA in LA, if you go back, you can see a dramatic increase in crimes. In fact, I want to say, I'm getting ready for my show tomorrow, but I think one of the stats that I have is that murders went up by 100 murders just in the city of Los Angeles alone the first year that Gascon became the DA. And they continued that way for, I think it was 2020, 2021, and 2022, and only dropped a little bit in 2022 through 2021, and they're calling that a success. They ignore the fact that it's significantly higher for the last 3 years that he's been in office comparison to the last year of Jackie Lacey, right? And so the media has been dishonest and lying to the public, which is why the public they get angry. And when you have these vigilante things go on, they are supportive, and then suddenly the media is surprised at their reaction. I don't know, Matt, what you want to comment on that?
Well, it's just statistics. We all know how you can do that. I can find snippets of time and go, all right, between February of 1999 and whatever, we had this, and then I extrapolate that, put it over here. But look, we've had a 20%. We've all dealt with statistics, and like you said, let's go back. I think Prop
47
was. I was on record as the public safety director in commerce. This was in like 2014 to 16, talking about how that was going to be the biggest disaster that has ever hit the state of California. And I just go back again to the drug offenders. You cannot illegalize drugs, allow people to use them who don't have a means for funding their habit, because the only way they're going to do that is through crime. It's that simple. I'll go back to that fundamental all day long until somebody tells me otherwise, kind of like what I saw up in Chatsworth when I was campaigning for sheriff, and they wanted me to present a model of defunding the police. And I said, well, you show me a model where you have removed the police from society and it has made it safer. You show me that model and I will study it and embrace it and even replicate it if it works. And I'm still waiting.
Yeah, exactly.
I was this is one of the things I'm going to use tomorrow on tomorrow's show on Briefing with the Chief on KGRA db.com, and I'm going to do a little bit of takedown of Luna. Now a lot of people don't like Luna, and for me the jury's still out a little bit, and the rank and file is mad. But you're balancing political priorities, and he was left with this over the top anti-police attitude. Some of the things Villanueva did, I liked, but he went over the top, and that just created a lot of bad feelings. And if he'd have balanced it out a little bit more, if he'd have fought the right battles and not all the battles, maybe it'd been a little different. So, but Luna is supportive of Gascon, and Luna did not support the death penalty and the murder of Ryan Klinkman-Blumer. And he's publicly supportive of these policies. And I'm going to talk about how Charlie Beck used to be supportive of George Gascon until he saw the policies and he withdrew his support. And that Bill Bratton stated publicly, hey, I liked Gascon. He helped implement the broken windows theory and community policing for me in LAPD before he left. I'm a progressive. I like progressive ideas. But the stuff that George Gascon is doing has not worked in any city that it's been implemented in. It's failures, right?
Exactly.
And so Luna needs to wake up and smell the coffee. Two rock stars, I guess, in policing have called out these policies as complete and utter failures, and yet he, because of his friendship with Gascon, and it is a mentorship that
his mentorship, he talks about that at length. In fact, they had some type of meeting, like a luncheon or something. Where he presented Gascon with some award and talked about how he's mentored him. And a lot of it is because they're both Hispanic in nature originally. And he helped him where he's gotten. Well, he's going to stick with his buddy Gascon, and he won't apply the law the way it should be applied. And Gascon doesn't, because Soros hates America. He was on 60 Minutes saying that 10 years ago. And that's what they want to do. They want to destroy us from the inside. And when you let these criminals out and you make life miserable for everybody, that's part of their plan.
Well, and I just think personal friendship and relationship, the public safety preempts that. Charlie Beck said, hey, George Gascon's a friend of mine, but he's wrong. That's why I'm withdrawing my support. I mean, obviously, Bill Bratton said, I thought highly of him, but he's wrong. It's not working anywhere.
Yeah, but you see, Luna has to have leadership skills to do that.
Yes.
And he's not going to say anything bad about his mentor. And so he's just going to languish and do what he does. He did that in Long Beach when he was at Long Beach. Nobody likes him in Long Beach.
Well, and here's the problem. He's the sheriff. And this is my criticism, and I'll say it tomorrow on my show. You're not a chief. You're a sheriff. You have political responsibilities, which means if public policy is not working and it's not working, you have to speak up. Your personal loyalties to George Gascon need to be put aside. And if George Gascon can't understand that, well, then, he shouldn't be in office anyways. Then he's not really your friend, right?
Exactly.
So, and if you push for the death penalty for the murder of Ryan Klinkman-Blumer, he has to understand that. Sitting silent on your hands just to support him over your deputies is tragic. Matt, you ran for sheriff. I'll let you comment, and then we'll get back to the show.
Well, I watched the press conference of the tragedy with Deputy Klinkman-Blumer and his family, and I was watching it very intently when Gascon made his little comment about not pursuing the death penalty on that suspect. Luna sat quietly. I know Robert Luna from having met him during the campaign, probably one of the nicest law enforcement executives you'll ever meet, but he's part of the political establishment. Let's be real about this. I don't think I don't follow it that closely, but I don't think he's fired anybody, at least executive wise. Yeah. I don't think he's promoted anybody. So, whatever he adopted, the status quo is what he's kept. But I will tell you, I watched that press conference and I literally was trying to jump through the television screen. See, now at that moment, I didn't realize that the family wasn't aware that Gascon wasn't pursuing the death penalty. I didn't know that, because had I been there in that press conference, even in my current state as a retiree, I probably would have went ballistic, and the media would have just turned the cameras on me. Because knowing what I know now, I guarantee I would have went ballistic.
I have no idea who he's getting his advice from, because I would have said
bullshit. It was total bullshit. And Gascon made a comment I will never forget or forgive him for. Yeah. He said, "Oh well, I'm not pursuing the death penalty because we all know that, number one, it's not going to bring Ryan back. And number two, it doesn't prevent crime." No, dipshit.
That's bullshit.
We are not pursuing that because nobody thinks it's going to bring Ryan back. I mean, we all know the reality of death. Okay. But nobody thinks that. So you're already insulting me. And then secondly, preventing crime. We're not trying to prevent crime. This crime already occurred. Okay. We're not trying to prevent the murder. We know that too, idiot. But what we're trying to do is hold somebody accountable to the level in which they deserve to go up and shoot a deputy sheriff in the back of the head. And that was so offensive to me, Pat. I as you can see, I get pissed.
There's also a responsibility for somebody who's running an office, a district attorney's office, to manage the cases to the best interest of the public. And and I'll lay this one out there, and you guys can briefly comment. We'll get back to the movie, because it bothers me. It's like one of the reasons why district attorneys, when they have a strong case, or even a case that's marginal, go for the death penalty, is it gives you leverage in the plea process, right? So if you're going to go for the death penalty and you got a good case, now the death penalty is going to cost you millions of dollars, right? It's going to cost you millions of dollars. And if you decide, and if you talk to the family and you say, hey, can we go for life without the possibility of parole on this? We got a good case. We can fight it. And it gives you leverage. It gives you leverage, because what's the defense attorney now trying to do?
They're trying to get lowered even with a possibility of parole.
Yeah, they're fighting, and the death penalty, they're fighting to save his life. So life without the possibility of parole is a win for them, right? It's a win for them, and it gives you leverage. So this is how a responsible prosecutor acts in the best interest, not only for safety and security of the community, but also financially, and how to manage an office. And this is a guy who's never pleaded a case in front of a judge at all. This is a guy who's never had to actually do a plea bargain himself, because he's never a DA. He was a cop who got a law degree and got appointed by Newsom to be a San Francisco DA, then carpet bagged down to LA to be the DA down here with George Soros money. This is who he is. But if you now start out with, well, we'll seek life without the possibility of parole, now the defense attorney's strategy is to undermine that and get life with parole to save his life, as you said, Matt.
I'll say one more thing about that, and that was that Sheriff Luna had a great opportunity there to really stand up for the deputy sheriff, stand up for his organization, law enforcement as a profession across the board, and still not lose much political clout, because everybody believes that murdering a deputy like that in cold blood deserves the death penalty. Most people do, unless you're just some bleeding heart against it. But he would not have lost. He lost more by not saying anything than he would have lost had he stood up for the deputy.
He lost
even the cop haters
with the people that work for him. Nobody likes him. He lost all credibility when he did that. And frankly, I went to the Klingenbrunner funeral because I'm very close ties to the family. And
I went to. I was there. I was there as well. And
and you noticed when he gave that piece of crap speech that he did, and with stupid jokes that he made, not one person clapped, not one person smiled. He got off the stage. Now those deputies came up that with their heart in their hand talking, everybody gave standing ovations. But nobody listened to Luna because he's a freaking idiot. He's a coward. He's not a leader.
That's why I love having John on. He tells it like it is. Well, I agree with Matt. Even the most ardent cop hater would have recognized the political importance of Luna supporting his troops, and he would have lost nothing politically and gained greatly within the organization, and that would have helped him balance out some of the changes that he has to do in the department, and he blew an opportunity to do the right thing, and it's a no-brainer for all of us. I just don't understand why he couldn't see that. And anyways, let's get into the next show, because this is one that we all could. This is the assault on the transit system, and so we all work transit policing, and we can all understand the crime that happens on it. But I like how Charles Bronson, or Paul Kersey, the character, just he sits in a car where he's almost by himself, reading the newspaper. This is like setting the snare to catch the rabbit. He's the trap is set. He's a hunter, and I don't think I really caught that when I watched this decades ago. The fact, but when you're thinking like a hunter, he's actually setting these guys up, is what he's doing, right? He's setting these guys up, and I really enjoyed the scene. because it really, I mean, the one thing walking down the street and trolling these guys, but this was a straight setup. John, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He's a bait. He made himself the bait, and he was just waiting to spring the trap.
Matt, you're the premier transit policing expert in Southern California. This happens on the train system. Of course, most people, well, actually, people are unaware. They're on their stupid phones. They're not paying attention. You need to be aware on the transit system. But he's clearly setting the bait for these guys, and he ends up taking these guys out.
Yeah, you know, it's scary riding on a train car where you're confined and you have a problematic person. It happened to me about, I'd say within the last year. I rode the Gold Line from Pasadena out toward Irwindale, and I was on the car pretty much alone, and there was a mentally deranged guy there, throwing punches to the wind, in the air. And it's a very unnerving, uneasy feeling. The deputies got on the car earlier, but they'd already stepped off. So I was like, oh man, this is not good. And, to the point where you're either getting off at the next stop or he is. And I think he got off, but it's being confined like that it's not a good feeling.
So on this scene, and we just went through the scene. Now he makes sure these guys are dead. He doesn't just shoot them once and they're disabled. He puts an extra one on each one of them. Make sure they're going to the happy hunting grounds, right? That's where they're going. And what I liked about this, but one of the actors, the guy that had the knife, and one of the movies that I like is the movie called True Romance. I don't know if you ever saw it. The movie was written by who's the guy that hates cops, but I liked the movie. I liked it. Was based in Detroit.
Baldwin.
And
Baldwin.
No, he's a cop hater too, but it was the director who did Reservoir Dogs and
Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, that's him. He actually wrote the script. It was done by somebody else.
I didn't know he hated cops. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he said some things publicly. Well, all right, so maybe hating cops is a little strong, but I'll just say he's not a supporter, right? But the guy with the knife is a very young Saul Rubnik, and if you remember in the movie, John, the producer that was a dope dealer as well. Remember that?
Yep.
That's him. When you go back, if you end up going back to the scene and watch it, that's him. I go, God, I recognize that guy. And then I looked it up and looked at who. So these are some Jeff Goldblum's really young. This guy's probably in his 20s when he does the spot. And then, later in the 90s, he's doing this True Romance movie. And I forget the gal in that movie. Arquette, right? Wasn't it
Rosanna Arquette?
Or Patricia or Rosanna? I can't. Arquette, yeah, she was beautiful in that movie. But it's funny, you recognize the young faces and you go, hey, I know that guy. And
there's a couple more in this movie too.
Well, which ones? What are we talking about, John? Have we already seen the scenes?
No, you haven't seen the scene yet. I don't know if you're going to play it. The one where it's on the bridge, where he's down in the park and the one guy's up.
Oh yes, yeah, we'll do that.
That guy
one.
on the stairs is.
Yeah, I think I hit all the murder scenes. But hey, so transit, Matt, you already said this. People fear. I know I told you the story, but the sheriff's department didn't understand transit. They just didn't, right? And I had an assistant sheriff just wanted to go on the red line. I'm coming down there and take me on the red line because, as you know, I was getting knifed in the back by other executives who had no idea what the hell they were talking about. And so he took an interest in what I was saying, and he actually came on the red line. And so we get on the subway, and Kavanaugh, he was in his late 60s, right?
Yeah.
And the first time we get this guy, he approaches us and says, "They're following me. They're following me. What do I do? They're following me." I'm like, oh God, and as I didn't tell anybody to look out for us, but I think some of the staff was looking out for us. And somebody stepped on, and I said, "Hey, you want to take care of this guy?" And then we go, we're go another 45 minutes into this, and this guy wearing a hoodie goes to push somebody onto the train tracks, and he's clearly mentally ill, and he's yoked. He's a big guy. And it's me and the 66-plus-year-old, assistant sheriff who probably hadn't been in a fight in a long time. And I'm thinking, I hadn't been in a fight in a long time. And I go, and I grab the guy's arm, and I'm just checking and I can feel his tricep. I go, oh, this is going to get ugly. That's all I could think. This is going to be really ugly. And this huge sergeant who was kind of working overtime from somewhere. He must have been 6'5", probably 280. He's 50 yards down. He comes walking towards us. Hey, do you need help? Yes, I do. He took care of him for us. But it really changed the perception of what policing meant on the transit system for that assistant sheriff. He understood at that
Mark
time.
Kavanaugh?
Yeah, that's who it was. I liked him. He was a good guy. He came to my
was.
defense, and he took the time to try and understand what we were trying to do, and he was a big supporter of ours. But yeah, Matt, you're right. It can be very intimidating getting on a transit system, and most people don't. The people who ride it, the transit to public, and this is where we slide all of our resources toward those people who don't ride. That's what I always felt about Metro, and we didn't pay enough attention to the people who are transit dependent. And I know I've said this before, and I know, Matt, you used it, but equity on a transit system is about a safe, efficient, and a cost-effective way to get to and from where you have to go if you're transit dependent. It isn't any of this. Everybody needs a free ride. Everybody needs this. None of that social justice warrior crap. Equity is the people who have no choice have a safe, efficient, and cost-effective choice. That's equity for public transit, and not this crazy leftist utopian vision of what transit should be. It's kind of a rant. You want to fill that in, Matt? You want to comment, or that's probably just you 100% agree on?
No,
that
I
one?
agree with you. I used to use that. I learned that from you, and I use that on the campaign a lot. That the guy commuting from West Los Angeles to his high-rise office in Los Angeles gets to drive safely to work each day. Then people on the lower strata of our socioeconomic environment here should be able to do the same, and that's how we policed it, and that was our commitment to the people who rode the system, and I think we did a pretty good job of that. I'm proud of what we accomplished there.
I agree.
Yeah, it was safer. The last time it was the safest. I think we got crime down to the lowest it possibly could be. I think there's a baseline that you're always going to have, and it just went up after we left. So, which is unfortunate. But you know what? They know the formula on how to do it. They just choose not to do it.
Yeah, they're gonna create their own police department somewhere down the road, and we're gonna find out it's expensive and disastrous and labor intensive. And I know that Sean Kehoe and the sheriff and all of them are working really hard to try to speak the truth about that. And but I think the people that are currently up in the LA Metro, they just have no clue. They're people from former federal law enforcement and personnel, and they just don't understand transit policing. They don't understand urban policing, and they have no clue what it's going to entail to create a police department.
Well, I think it's like anybody, executives building their empire, whether it's successful or not, it's for them, right? That's how I see this. Let's get into the next scene. It's flashing money. And what I like about this scene is he's got so many different ways that he sets the trap. He's in a bar. He's has a drink. He opens his wallet. He's flashing hundreds. And he's setting the trap for these guys. They follow him down into a subway platform. Here we go again, right? Which I just... maybe it's 2 a.m. and nobody's on the subway platform, but the fact that nobody's on the subway platform other than these the bad guys and him is surprising to me. And they trap him and they want the money, right? And but what I thought was really interesting was the flashing of the money to entice them to follow him. He's hunting them now, and it's pretty clear that's what's going on, right, John?
Oh, absolutely.
And as we watch this confrontation. Now he ends up getting injured here, but he's ready for him. His gun is positioned right. He takes out all 3 of them, but you're going to see when he gets a chance, he puts an extra one in the guys that are closest to him. So this isn't just about revenge. He's angry too. I think that's what's going on here, Matt. He's just angry. Here's a guy with his knife, the switchblade knife, which is so 1970s, right?
Well, the whole thing is 70s because you couldn't portray criminals like this in this day and age because of race.
Yeah. You're right. They would there'd be a hue and cry, and I think when I did a movie, and I forget what movie we were doing, and the mayor of New York was incensed by the movie because it was portraying it. I think it was Port Apache, the Bronx with Paul Newman. that they were really angry at how the Bronx was, or New York City was portrayed at the time. And that was actually, I think, supposed to be in the late 60s, early 70s as well. And they agreed to modify it to some degree, I guess. But those were all based upon true stories. So here this guy gets shot and he manages to get to the top and he dies. And he gives a description to the police. And this is really the first time that they have a description. But also what is building up, after he shot the 3 guys in the alley, Denzel Washington and friends, they did the ballistics test, and now they know they got a vigilante, and that is leaking out to the media, which it's interesting how they portray it. Instead of, white suspect hunting down bad guys, it's the vigilante, and they're talking about the vigilante, and the media, the political structure, they don't want to admit it, but it's having a benefit because criminals they stop robbing. So what'd you think of the scene, Matt, and what do you think of the the fallout from having a vigilante hunting the criminals in the city?
Well, I think that if I remember correctly, he had the support of the community, right? Didn't they start to celebrate this guy?
Yeah.
And he's kind of seen as a superhero, I think. Batman type deal. Kill the bad guys and and make a name for yourself. That's kind of was the sense I was getting by watching the movie.
Yeah. John, what do you think?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. They were tired. They're tired of the crime. The high crime. They're tired of it. This guy's reducing crime. He's killed bad people. He hasn't killed any good people. He's killed bad people. They're all for it. You can't blame them.
I think that mentality rings true today. With the social media, you see those clips on YouTube, the shorts, and I don't know, the Instagram or Twitter or whatever. But whatever you see a store proprietor shoot a guy or something, it always gets a lot of play.
Oh yeah, big time. and if you look at the comments on some of those, the guy's in a jewelry store or a bodega, and he's got his shotgun out, and 2 guys come in with AR-15s, and he kills one, and the other one runs away with a bullet in his butt, and everybody just loves it.
Yeah,
because it's the way it should be. It's.
Well, we got a question from the audience that I'll throw out to you, and it's basically one question. They want to: how much did there's a lot of questions they want to ask us, but how much did closing the state mental hospitals impact our jobs? For us, most of those hospitals had closed for the most part, or were dramatically reduced before we all started working. So it was something that we had to deal with. And I would say, and certainly my panel can weigh in, that the lack of appropriate support for the mental illness, I think, contributes significantly to homelessness. And I will say that many of our homeless who are mentally ill they're not stupid. They know how to survive, and they do switch to crimes of opportunity to survive on the street. So there's an impact there. And then some of them, and that includes violent crime, robbing. I think we did a survey. John was working with me, and so was Matt, of the homeless that were riding the transit system. And one of the questions we asked is how many of them had been victims of crime, and nearly all of them had been victims of crime. In fact, that was one of the reasons why they wrote our transit system at the time. It was safer on the transit system and on the streets. How many of them had mental illness? How many of them were self-medicating with alcohol? It is definitely a significant problem. And my problem with the new policy change is we did arrest them for the crimes they committed. And if putting them in some kind of mental health treatment was appropriate, we did that, although the systems were not in place to keep them in custody long enough for treatment. And the law enforcement became the tool to deal with the mentally ill, which I would think would be the failing of public policy.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Right. And so we just managed the mental health issues because we didn't have an appropriate system in place to deal with them. I don't know if you agree with that, John, and we'll start with you, John.
When I came on, we still had Metropolitan State Hospital available. But then a couple years after that, it closed. And I agree, they're on the street. But at least our department, LAPD, got a writ against them to keep them from touching the homeless or talking to them or moving them or taking their stuff or anything. So they couldn't even go down to Main Street where, Skid Row and do anything. We, on the other hand, didn't get that. I can't even think of the word.
Consent decree.
Yeah, we didn't get that consent decree because we had the MET teams, remember? The mental health teams, mental health evaluation teams. A doctor, a psychologist, a couple deputies. I mean, they all went out. And if somebody was just a dirty drug dealer, he went to jail. If somebody was on drugs but had mental issues, they got at least a 72-hour hold. And we put them in, and if they were homeless but weren't any of those, we got them into a placement home for them to sit. I mean, we did a lot when the MET teams were available. Those guys did a lot of work to keep those people off the streets, which also reduces crime. And it really was a win-win, but then they got rid of that.
Well, they decided law enforcement shouldn't be involved. And I'll add to my responses, the governor and other people on the left are beginning to figure out. That's why he's implementing a new strategy called care courts, where you use the courts, and just about anybody can commit that has any kind of relationship with the person who has mental illness or addiction issues, which we weren't using. The far left were mad at the governor for doing this, but he is recognized, even though I'm not a fan, that what he's done in the past is failing. The utopian vision of the left in dealing with the mentally ill and addicted is not working. You can't just sprinkle pixie dust, pray for unicorns, and hope for rainbows, and it all work. It's not going to happen. It's hard work. It includes the criminal justice system, includes the courts. He has recognized that, I think reluctantly, because it goes against his core. Matt, I'll let you answer that question. We'll get back to the movie.
Well, I remember when we were, in patrol, we had, transients, right, that would come in and out and maybe do some panhandling. We get a call periodically. And then 5150 was a call we'd get periodically. But it wasn't like, that wasn't our main focus all day long. And they, now you go to downtown Los Angeles and start working your way out into any community in the suburbs. And you see these guys standing on the corner just barking at the moon. And I like to look at, causal factors. What are the contributing factors? And I don't believe it's the price of housing and, that kind of stuff. I really try to look back on, okay, what could have caused this? And I have a hypothesis. I think I've talked to you about it before. But, heroin doesn't cause psychosis. Rock cocaine just caused zombies as far as I could see, but not psychosis. Marijuana, I don't believe, triggers psychosis. Alcohol doesn't, for the most part. But I truly believe that the methamphetamine that hit the street in 1990 has contributed to this homeless problem, because that's a 34-year-old problem now. And how old are the people that are out in the streets?
Yeah.
And, 34 is the oldest user, but methamphetamine's been around since then. So
I haven't been talking about it. You're right. The way they changed how they manufacture PCP, methamphetamine included P2P.
P2P was completely changed it, and P2P triggers psychosis. Yeah. So anybody that was using that drug when they were, 18, 19, 20, 22 years old, I would love to do a study. I don't want to, because I don't want a PhD, but I would love to do the study and say, okay, here where they were in 1990 to 95 or 2000, where are they today? And I think I know the answer. They're either dead, they're in jail, or they're homeless.
So for all our Walter White Breaking Bad fans out there, ephedrine used to be one of the primary precursors for making methamphetamine. And because we restricted ephedrine, we switched to a chemical. They switched, the bad guys did, to a chemical called P2P. It's a belief amongst the health industry professionals and us that P2P in methamphetamine is causing psychosis. That's what the retired Chief Matt Rodriguez is talking about in a very eloquent way. Let's jump in the scene by Olympia Dukakis. I hope that helps to answer your question there. And now I did this scene mostly because it was Olympia Dukakis. So it's everybody's together. They're doing the investigation, and the lead investigator, I forget the actor's name. He's an Italian guy, John. Vincent Gardenia. Yeah, his theory is, hey, this is probably cops. This is probably former military So he's looking at World War II vets, Korean War vets, and Vietnam vets in a particular block area that is adjacent to the grocery store that they bought. D'Agostino's, I think, is the grocery store where they bought their groceries. So the men who served in the military who live in a certain block area, that's how they're narrowing down who their suspect or potential suspects are. And that's a pretty good gumshoe cop strategy, right? Pretty good thinking. But Olympia Dukakis is telling the crowd about all the information they found, and they're giving out. So I just like the fact that it was Olympia Dukakis. This is the, I think, cousin or sister of George Dukakis,
president
who ran for president. And she's young, and she's kind of got this nasally kind of delivery that she's doing there. And you've seen her in other. And there's Vincent Gardenia. Is that there? He is. Gardenia. And you've seen him in stuff in the past, but so it was, gumshoe strategy, which is really how you don't sit down and solve crimes at a computer databases are used to develop leads. That's what you use it for. And that's whenever I just had Danny R. Smith on, and I did his book, Nothing Left to Prove. And he was the homicide detective. He had chronic post-traumatic stress. And so one of the things I want to do in my other show is occasionally profile a cop story and just talk about it. And we talked about it, but he also writes a detective series, a fictional detective series novel. And he talks about how do you catch the bad guy? What we did? What are the things we did? And when I see this in the movies, I'm glad that it's portrayed in a thoughtful way, the whole gumshoe stuff. What'd you think, John? Olivia Dukakis, was she one of the ones that you were thinking of that we needed to address yet?
Yeah, she's one of them. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she's a bleeding heart liberal also, but she played a good role in that. And that was the good police work, actually. It didn't really find the guy, but he gets there eventually, the cop.
Yeah, well, it was the only thing that really threw him off is he's a conscientious objector, and that kind of distracted them from looking at him. And I don't know if you guys are aware, I forget the name of the guy, but there was a conscientious objector. It was either World War II or Korea. Maybe it was World War II.
World War II.
He got the Medal of Valor, right?
Honor, yeah.
Medal of Honor. And they were fighting the Japanese, and he was with his squad or platoon, and they were virtually wiped out, and they were on the top of a bluff. And he went up there. He was pulling the wounded off. He pulled like 6 or 7 wounded off on his shoulder down a rope.
Yep.
Wasn't that Clint Eastwood's Hacksaw Ridge?
It might have been portrayed in there.
Yeah, because remember they had
may have been in that.
They had the cliff.
There's a movie about that guy.
The guy was a medic.
I can't think of the name of it right now.
Yeah, he was a medic, but he was also a conscientious objector. And there's a great, if you ever get a chance to find a podcasting channel where they go over the stories of all the Medal of Valor winners, right? And his story is just so interesting. And he got seriously wounded, and then he hid, and he managed to get his way down, and he survived. And he was kind of ostracized from his folks, his troops, leading up to that because he wouldn't go fight. And then after that, obviously the attitude completely changed towards him.
For some reason, I keep going back to Hacksaw Ridge. That I think.
No, you're right. That is the movie, Hacksaw Ridge.
They portrayed him in that movie. He was going up the. There was a rope on a cliff, and he was going up, and he was rescuing people through the smoke and bringing them on his shoulder. I'm almost sure that was the movie.
That is it.
There's based upon a true story, and if you get a chance to look up the Medal of Valor podcast and look up those stories, they're really interesting stories about people who acted in heroic ways that, for whatever reason, we call heroes or people who've been oppressed are all our heroes, but not the people who fought for their rights. Which is an interesting concept to me. But so they're getting on to Paul Kersey. They kind of know him. They kind of interesting. They break into his house and do an illegal search.
Yeah, I saw some early profiling.
That was early Miranda.
Was it?
Before Miranda.
It was. You need a search. You didn't need a search warrant back there. You could do a pre-search warrant search.
Hey, it was New York. I don't know.
It's New York. That's right. Well, he's not taking money, but he is breaking in and doing a. I don't know if you caught that. I go, okay. I mean, searching, and this is the lieutenant doing it. and you know, it's funny because when you read, if you ever read Watergate's thing, All the President's Men and stuff like that, it was actually pretty consistent to go and do bag jobs where you would break in to see what's there and put illegal wiretaps in, and that this is coming out of the 60s into the 70s. So I guess I shouldn't be too surprised given the time frame that this happened, but it just caught my attention. Oh boy, there's a Brady issue there.
Yeah, just a bit.
Right. Well, let's go into the district attorney scene because it really is an interesting political take that the district attorney and I think the chief of police have with what's going on with the vigilante. And in this scene, you know, they're talking about the crime rates and they kind of want to manage this problem. They want to stop him to stop killing people, but because they're done all the ballistics on these guys, it's all the same gun. He's killed how many people has he killed at this point? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I get that right? 6? Oh no, 7, 8, 9.
More
So
than that, 'cause we didn't show the scene in the park with the 3 guys.
oh yeah, okay. So I think he's up to 9 already, and the gun is matching. And these guys don't want him caught, or they want him to stop, but they don't really want, because he's taken on mythical status here. The news media is talking about him, and crime is going down, and they like the benefits of the vigilante, which, you know, I mean, that's talk about what is it? That's pretty Machiavellian thinking, right? This the way they're thinking, and we just want him gone. We don't want him captured. We don't want him to be a martyr. And we want people to think he's still out there. What do you think, John?
Yeah, it's exactly what they were doing. But, you know, they want the benefits, but at the same time, they don't want to have the news media eviscerate them for, you know, taking in a vigilante who's dropped crime. Because they still, either way, they look with mud on their face because the crime's been so high for years.
So contrast this. I mean, Matt, I'm going to throw this one at you, and I want you to contrast what you saw in the movie and what these guys want. They want the benefits of the vigilante. They don't really want him caught. They don't want him to be a martyr. They just want him to go away, with the Daniel Penny situation in New York and Alvin Bragg's prosecution of Daniel Penny. How they handled him versus how these guys are looking at this politically in the movie.
Yeah, I think it went a little Hollywood right here. You know, that's where it happens, right? When you're watching movies and you go, okay, well, there's reality, and then there's unrealistic, you know, portrayals in Hollywood, and that's kind of right here where I saw the twist. I saw the point though, what they were getting at. Hey, we like the we like the fact he's driving crime down. We don't want a martyr because he's taken on this heroic status. But I just didn't see it as being very realistic at that point.
Oh,
okay, I get that. But now let's look at Daniel Penny. Do you, relationship, completely different response, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
Scenario.
Go ahead.
He wasn't a vigilante hunting people. He was saving somebody. He was
aiding
somebody.
That's just totally different situation. I mean, that's just ridiculous. We're talking about the guy that was chokeholding somebody, right?
Right.
On the transit system.
Yeah, the military guy.
Yeah, you know, this guy being persecuted and prosecuted for trying to help somebody on the transit system is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Well, it's right.
Yeah, I think what we are seeing in the movie and we're seeing in real life, that, you know, the public is supportive. Yeah, because that's the other part, is we only touched about in the news media. You know, they pick up the story and they're running with the story. And I always remind people, when it comes to the news media, they're not there to print the truth.
No.
They're only there to get you to pick up the newspaper or click on the item. That's all they're trying to do. So they want to frame it in some kind of sensationalized way or a scandalous way, so that you'll read through the article. And and I tell people, when you read about what they print about police, keep in mind, their goal is to get you to pick up the paper or click on the article so that you see the ad. Their goal isn't to tell you the truth. And if you want the truth, don't ever read, you know, mainstream media, because that's not what they're there for. They'll only touch on the truth if it benefits them to some degree. And I mean, this used to be understood with the yellow journalism. Now they pretend like they're what's that? Only the news that's fit to print. You know, who I don't know who does that one. And CNN, I forget what their tagline is. Fair and balanced, or unless that's Fox. But you know, their goal is to get you to chime in. Let's see what's in it. Soldiers.
I disagree.
It's my opinion that soldiers shouldn't. Yeah, with the comment. No, I think here's the thing about military and police. We used to recruit from the military, and one of the reasons why, and I didn't bring this up earlier, and I think we did talk about this on the show, but we implemented a psychological examination of anybody that gets hired. Fortunately, that happened after I was hired, and you know, otherwise I probably wouldn't have made it. But here's what I think is happening. I think a lot of those social justice warriors have become psychologists, sociologists, or whatever, who are doing this hiring for police. They have their attitudes and their biases towards who they think should be police officers. And I really believe that's one of the reasons why military folks, to some degree, are getting washed out in the process. I mean, I don't have any evidence to show that, but just the way they ask their questions, you know, and what they are looking for. You know, they're looking like people who, you know, lived in a cocoon and never did anything in their life. And that's crazy. We need people who have world experience, people who understand what it means to work together as a team to solve problems. You're not going to find these, if you're looking for pristine people who've never had any experiences in life, that's the worst people that you should have as cops.
Absolutely right.
You know, we and the military takes these guys and gals at 18, trains them and gives them experience. That's why I think the military, and you know, not everybody in the military is going off to war, so it's not going to be all these chronic post-traumatic stress guys running around giving them guns. That you know, so I kind of disagree with that. I think a couple of years seasoning in the military makes people a better candidate for law enforcement versus you know, excuse my language, shit, what we see going on these college campuses, people marching around saying anti-Semitic stuff. You know, please tell me, you know, why would they be more valuable as candidates than somebody that's served in our military and has taken an oath and lived by that oath all that time? Matt, what do you think of that?
I'm sorry, Pat. I'm reading the comments. There's people, they're calling for community policing back when we used to hand out baseball cards and be nice. And I agree with that stuff. So yeah. I'm sorry. So I was fixated on the comments.
Well, military, we shouldn't be washing the military out. You know, military experience gives somebody a greater worldview and makes them a better candidate, I think, for hiring. It shouldn't preclude other people, but we shouldn't be excluding military just because they were in the military. We shouldn't assume that they're damaged by combat.
Everybody hired in our profession is they're hired on an individual basis. We know that every case is different. I just read the comment where the guy says that he doesn't believe trained killers could be good protecting servers, you know, and I disagree with that. It's all individual. Yeah, you know, I think that we probably have historically had people, you know, who want to come into law enforcement to kill, right? But, you know, they hopefully get weeded out in the background and or psychological process. So I wouldn't agree with that. I think probably, again, I said it earlier, John, do you get more experience at Mount San Antonio College in Walnut, eating your mom's breakfast every day, going to take a political science class, or to go, to Germany after boot camp, and, you know, you get to hear your sergeant barking up down your throat every day. I think you learn more during that period. And there's probably, I worked with a lot of great military people that I have great respect for, that were in the military, that we worked with, and then many that weren't as well. So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, that's true. But it's the difference between a follower and a leader. And you get guys from the military, they know what leadership is. I'll tell you what, their demeanor's different. Their mindset's different, but you get these kids out of college that have never had any life experience. They're followers. They're not leaders.
Well, that was me when I went in the academy. I'm guilty. When I got in the academy, I latched on to every military guy I could find, because I surely wasn't prepared. My brother and my dad didn't tell me what was up. You know, I found out when I got there.
Well, we all worked with somebody who served in the military, and he won't talk about his military service because I think it was down in, you know, El Salvador. And you guys all know it, former Marine, you know, he played football in college, you know, you all know who I'm talking
Well,
about.
speaking of that guy,
Solid guy,
hey,
solid
that
guy.
if I think we're talking about the same guy. I sent him a text last night with about 1 minute left in the game because he's a massive Washington Husky.
Yes.
And I sent him a picture of the Washington helmet. And I think I almost jinxed it because remember Texas started coming back, and he wrote me back that it was right when he wrote back. Oh, I know what it was. The guy had interfered with the punt, the fair catch, and he wrote back that he was sweating and been sweating the whole fourth quarter. he needed a shower.
I'll have to bring him on my show. You know, you'll have to send me his number because I don't have it. I'd love to bring him on.
Well, he's living in Tennessee now. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't know that, but he also got the Medal of Valor on our department for saving the life of a deputy sheriff.
Yeah.
So yes, I believe that we should be looking at our military. In fact, I think we should be recruiting heavily from them. I do believe having a college degree is important, but I do believe the two are equatable, and if they have both, even more. Now let's get into the last one. On the hunt, they know he's the guy. They're surveilling him. They want to keep him pinned down. They don't want any more shootings. They want to get him to leave. He knows it. He can see them, but he slips them because and this is where, you know, he enjoys he enjoys going hunting, just like the guy who's hunting the deer, you know, up in northern Michigan. He likes his hunts. He's enjoying it now. He makes sure his kills are dead, and these guys are trying to manage the problem instead of just arresting him. And he gets out on his hunt. And he ends up shooting out. And so this is the scene where they're on the bridge, right, John? So who's the actor that who are we talking about?
At the top of the stairwell, that's Lawrence Hilton Jacobs from Welcome Back, Kotter.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Boom Boom. Is that Boom Boom Washington? Is that who it is?
I don't remember what the character's name was, but yeah, he played with Travolta in that Welcome Back, Kotter.
Yeah,
the black kid.
Well, if anybody in the audience knows, that's Boom Boom Washington. That's who he is, right there.
He was great. Welcome Back, Kotter. He was excellent.
Yeah. So, okay. So he's surrounded again. He's not at all intimidated by three guys, but one of them I think has a gun. I think the guy at the top of the stairs has a gun, and he ends up, I think, killing at least two of these guys, and I think he makes sure they're down too for good, and one guy gets away, I believe, if I remember correctly. But he chases that guy down. He doesn't. It's like, hey, I think I wounded him. I'm going to keep going after him. And even though he's been shot himself, he chases him down. But that's, you know, of course you have to if you're Charles Bronson, right? I mean, it's you have to. This is the character. That's why they got Charles Bronson. Here he is. He's shooting. Now I would have thought he'd had a bigger gun. I don't think 32 would have taken these guys out like they did. As I saw in the Carson Lobby shooting, they stay up. They stay up. After our friend shot the guy to save the deputy's life, he stayed up. He was ready for action. He had already taken a fatal wound, but they don't go down like this.
Especially with heavy clothing on.
No, yeah. So I mean that part was unrealistic, but that's right. I did write down Welcome Back, Kotter, Boom Boom Washington. So anyway, so he gets out on the hunt. He kills these guys. He ends up getting shot. And let's see, I agree. Training, psychological assessment. You know what? They do a psychological assessment, and then once they're hired, and we have we can't vilify our military and say that there's something wrong with our guys just because they're in the military. You know, in fact, most of them have not been into combat, and so because there are a lot of support personnel that part of our military, and the ones that have been in combat, we do an assessment. If they're good, they're good. We hire him. The person we're just talking about served a great career, saved lives on the sheriff's department, and he served with honor and integrity, and not one problem with the man. He was solid. He was a solid guy.
Gerry.
So here's the guy who's running, and he's running away, and these guys have figured out that Paul's on the hunt. They hear that the shooting's nearby. They go there, and they eventually, you know, they find Kersey, they get him to the hospital, and he survives this as he's trying to hunt this guy down. He actually survives it. And I think the ending scene here is with this guy is he's challenged him. He says, you know, he wants him to draw like it's the Old West. He likes that whole. Remember when he went to Arizona? They talked about the Old West. You fixed your problem right on the street there in the main town, and that's what he wanted him to do. And he ends up collapsing. But what I like about I don't the final scene. I don't think I had it recorded. Is after they encourage him to leave. He ends up in Chicago. Now I got some stats. I got this lady who's going to come on my show, and I forget her newspaper, but in it they're talking about Kim Fox up in Cook County is retiring, or she's not going to run for election, and who's going to replace that Soros-funded DA up there. But I was looking at their crime stats, their murder stats. It's outrageous how many people are dying in Chicago.
Oh,
and
God.
So. Unbelievable that they tolerate this there, and they keep voting these idiots in Chicago, given the homicide rate. It was like it has almost doubled in the last few years, and they're doubling down on the policies. The Democratic Party that controls that city, the Democratic machine, are doubling down on the policies. So I thought it was funny because I just been kind of educating myself on what's going on in Chicago so that I could expand the interest from viewers from around the country in my show. And I was looking at Chicago as an option. I thought, oh my God. And then this guy and Paul Kersey or Charles Bronson ends up in Chicago, his next hunting ground. What do you think of the scene, Matt? And what do you think about the fact that he goes to Chicago?
I didn't really pick up on that, Pat, at the end of the movie. I didn't. Yeah. I just know that I remember the chief, or I think the commissioner, tells him basically, hey, you got to get out of town, right? When he's in the hospital, and doesn't he quit with like by 5 p.m. or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Is that by noon? Do I have to leave by noon?
Yeah, I got to
leave
like by sundown.
By sundown. Yeah.
So he kind of picked up on that trip to Arizona. Kind of, it looked like it resonated with him, But yeah, no, I didn't pick up too much on him heading to Chicago.
Yeah, but
Johnny
the best part about that?
What?
I knew there was going to be a sequel.
Yeah. After that, when you saw it, and I'm going to use the actor Kevin Major Howard in the next Death Wish 2. But I appreciate you guys coming on with me. Any closing thoughts before we end the show?
Yeah, one other actor that we didn't mention. Do you remember the guard? I wrote down guard. It might have been the doorman at the hotel.
Yeah,
that's Al Lewis, Grandpa Munster.
Oh
wow!
Yes.
Hey, I really enjoy doing this with John because you're such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to all these actors and movies and stuff. So it's great. It's great seeing both of you guys. Happy New Year! Thank you guys for having me
God
on.
bless. Happy New Year, guys.
All right, thank you, and Happy New Year, everybody. Yes,
hey,
we'll see you.
Sorry about the sound. I had to switch from my iPad to my phone just before the break.
No, you've been good all day. You've been
good. Huh?
It's been good.
Okay.
We survived. Stick around for a debrief, and thank you for all of our audience who's chiming in. Hopefully we answered some of your questions. And until the next show, we'll see you then.
Cool.
All right. Cheers.